Sunita Ikenna's culinary dream is drowning in predatory debt when she crashes into a blood-red Lamborghini and discovers the owner is Seo Kong, the ruthless Korean venture capitalist who holds her financial death sentence. Seo Kong presents an offer to her. For more years of extended debt, nearly 200,000 in capital, and freedom from the repairs, if she becomes his personal chef 3 nights a week. What begins as obligation ignites into obsession as their professional arrangement combusts into something far more dangerous, binding them together in ways no contract ever could. But then how did it happen? Sunita Ikenna would later think about this moment as the exact second her life split in two, before the crash and after. Before, she was drowning in debt, but still treading water. After, she belonged to a man who wore silence like armor and controlled her fate with the stroke of a pen. But that afternoon, racing through downtown Atlanta with her mind elsewhere and her future collapsing, all she heard was the scream of metal against metal and the shattering of glass that sounded like her dreams breaking apart. 3 months earlier, Sunita had signed papers she didn't fully understand. The spice route was her inheritance translated into ambition, her grandmother's Nigerian recipes reimagined for a generation that craved authenticity with Instagram aesthetics. She'd poured everything into the lease, the renovations, the equipment. When her savings ran dry, Vanguard Holdings appeared like an answer to prayer, offering capital with terms that seemed aggressive, but manageable. She'd been naive. The repayment schedule was designed to choke her. The interest compounded weekly. The penalties for late payments were catastrophic. Now, sitting in her decade-old Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been glowing for 6 months, Sunita was on her way to beg for mercy. Her hands shook on the steering wheel as she rehearsed her pitch. She'd prepared financials showing 3 consecutive weeks of profit, testimonials from food critics, projections that proved the spice route could survive if they'd just give her breathing room. Her phone buzzed.
Marcus, heure sous chef.
She glanced down for half a second. The Lamborghini appeared out of nowhere, backing out of a private parking structure. Sunita's foot slammed the brake, but momentum and bad tires made the decision for her. The impact was almost gentle, a slow-motion kiss of bumpers that nonetheless produced a sound that would haunt her nightmares. For a moment, everything stopped. Then her car door was yanked open, and she was looking up at a man who seemed to have been carved from ice and expensive cologne.
Out, he said.
Just one word, but his accent wrapped around it like razor wire covered in silk. Sunita stumbled onto the pavement, her professional clothes suddenly feeling cheap and wrong. The man was tall, lean in a way that suggested discipline rather than deprivation. His suit probably cost more than her monthly revenue. His hair was swept back, revealing a face that was all sharp angles and controlled fury. But it was his eyes that stopped her apologies in her throat. Dark, assessing, utterly devoid of mercy. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. I can give you my insurance information." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. He walked past her without acknowledgement, circling the Lamborghini with the careful attention of a surgeon examining a wound. The rear quarter panel was crushed, the taillight assembly shattered, the bumper cracked and hanging at an angle that looked obscene on something so beautiful. Sunita's insurance had a $5,000 deductible and wouldn't come close to covering this. She knew enough about cars to recognize limited edition when she saw it. The blood-red paint alone probably cost more than her entire vehicle. "Do you know what this is?" His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. "A Lamborghini?"
Ahoratsansto.
One of 75 in this color combination. The repair cost will be approximately $300,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. 300,000. She couldn't even process a number that large in the context of her own responsibility. I can't. Her voice failed completely. He pulled out his phone, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he was calling the police. Instead, he made a brief call in Korean, his tone clipped and authoritative. When he finished, he finally looked at her directly. "Your name?" "Sunita. Sunita Ikenna." Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Her stomach dropped. "You own the spice route." It wasn't a question. He knew. which meant he knew about her debt, her meeting, everything. Because of course he did. The universe wasn't just cruel, it was efficient. She couldn't make herself say it. Seo Kong. I believe you were on your way to see me. The world tilted. Sunita actually had to put her hand on her car to stay upright. The board member she'd been scheduled to meet, the man who held her financial death sentence in his hands, was standing in front of her with $300,000 worth of damage between them. I'm going to be sick, she whispered. Not on the car. He said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact. Then he was moving, his hand on her elbow, guiding her away from both vehicles with surprising gentleness.
Breathe.
Slowly. Sunita tried to obey, pulling air into her lungs while her mind screamed. This was it. Everything she'd built gone. They'd sue her into oblivion. She'd lose the restaurant, her apartment, probably end up filing for bankruptcy, while still somehow owing money she'd never be able to repay. I'm sorry, she managed. I'm so sorry. Kong studied her with those depthless eyes. A black Mercedes pulled up beside them, and he opened the back door. Get in.
What?
We still have a meeting.
Get in the car.
It was possibly the worst idea in human history, getting into a vehicle with a man she'd just hit, a man who had every reason to destroy her. But what choice did she have? Sunita slid into the leather interior and Kong followed, maintaining careful distance between them. The driver pulled away without needing directions. Sunita watched her Honda disappear in the side mirror, left behind like the last piece of her old life. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without interruption. They drove in silence through neighborhoods that got progressively more expensive until the Mercedes turned into a private golf club that Sunita had only seen in magazines. The building was all glass and white stone, designed to intimidate. Kong led her through the lobby, past staff who nodded with practiced deference, into a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking impossibly green fairways. He gestured to a chair. Sunita sat. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. A server appeared with water and disappeared just as quickly. Kong settled across from her, removing his suit jacket with precise movements and draping it over the chair beside him. In just his white shirt and vest, he looked younger than she'd first thought. Early 30s, maybe. Successful enough to radiate authority, but not yet worn down by it. Your payment was due yesterday, he said. I know. That's why I was coming to meet with you. I have projections, I have proof that the business is growing. I just need more time. You need a miracle. He opened a folder that had been waiting on the table. Her financial life, laid bare in neat columns. At your current rate of growth, accounting for seasonal variance and market competition, you'll reach profitability in approximately 18 months. Your debt comes due in 4 months. The math is simple. I can work harder. I can cut costs. You're already working 70-hour weeks. You haven't taken a day off in 3 months. You fired your line cook last week to save money and absorbed his shifts yourself. What exactly will you cut? Sleep? The fact that he knew these details should have frightened her. Instead, something else stirred beneath the panic. He'd been watching, paying attention.
Why?
Then tell me what to do, she said, and hated how her voice broke. You clearly didn't bring me here to just tell me I'm screwed. Kong leaned back, his fingers steepled in a gesture that reminded her of every movie villain she'd ever seen. Except this was real, and she was trapped across from him with $500,000 in debt and no way out. I'm going to offer you a restructuring plan. Why would you do that? Because I don't want another empty storefront on that block. Because your restaurant has potential that's being strangled by poor financial planning. Because... He paused, and for the first time his mask slipped slightly. I've eaten at the Spice Route 4 times. Your suya spring rolls are exceptional. Your jollof risotto is an abomination that somehow works. You have a gift. Sunita blinked. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him to care about the food at all. But nothing comes free, she said carefully.
No.
Nothing does. He slid a document across the table. I will extend your debt deadline by 4 years. I will inject $195,000 into the business in exchange for 50% ownership. And I will forgive the Lamborghini repairs. It sounded too good, which meant it wasn't. In exchange for what? Three things. First, you accept me as a full partner with voting rights on major business decisions. Second, you provide monthly financial reports with complete transparency. Third, he paused, and something in his expression shifted. Not softer, but more intent. You agree to serve as my personal chef and consultant. Dinner, 3 nights per week, at my residence or location of my choosing. For the duration of the debt restructuring. Sunita's mind raced.
Personnel chef.
3 nights a week. For 4 years. That's not a business arrangement. I don't even know what that is. It's the price of salvation. Kang's voice was flat, unbending. You can accept these terms, or I can proceed with collections on your current debt, plus the vehicle damage. Your choice. She wanted to throw the papers in his face. Wanted to tell him exactly what he could do with his restructuring plan. But the truth was staring her down with dark eyes and perfect posture. She had no choice. She'd never had a choice. Why me? You could hire any chef in the city. I don't want any chef. I want you. The way he said it made something coil tight in her stomach. This was a terrible idea. Everything about this screamed danger. But the alternative was losing everything her grandmother had taught her, everything she'd built. If I agree, there have to be boundaries. Such as? The cooking arrangement stays professional. You don't control my life outside of what's in this contract. And if you ever make me feel unsafe, the deal is void. Kong considered this, his gaze never leaving hers. Then he nodded, once sharp and definitive. Agreed. I'll have my attorney add those provisions. He produced a pen, set it on top of the papers. Do we have a deal, Miss Ikenna? Sunita stared at the pen like it was a snake. Once she signed, her life would belong to him in ways she couldn't fully calculate yet. But if she didn't sign, she'd lose everything anyway. She picked up the pen. The first dinner was scheduled for the following Thursday. Kong provided an address in Buckhead, one of those modern glass houses that looked like architectural art. Sunita arrived with her knife kit and enough ingredients to prepare a menu that would prove she was worth the investment. The house was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, sterile. Everything in shades of white and gray and black, like color was a weakness he couldn't afford. Kong met her at the door in casual clothes that probably still cost more than her monthly rent. Dark jeans, a black Henley that showed off a build that suggested regular gym time. His hair was unstyled, falling slightly into his eyes. He looked younger, more human. It made everything worse. Kitchen is this way. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all professional-grade appliances and marble countertops that had probably never seen real use. Sunita set down her bags and started unpacking, trying to ignore the way Kong leaned against the island, watching her every movement. What are you making? Egusi soup with pounded yam, honey gochujang chicken wings, and coconut jollof. She kept her voice professional, distant. A fusion menu. Since we're both apparently in the business of mixing things that don't traditionally belong together. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Pointed. You asked for honesty in those provisions. I did. Sunita started prepping, her hands moving through familiar motions that usually brought calm. But nothing felt calm with Kong watching her like she was a specimen under glass. Do you always stare at people while they work? Only when they interest me. She chopped vegetables harder than necessary. I'm not here to be interesting. I'm here to cook. You can be both. Sunita refused to look at him, focusing instead on blooming her spices in oil, the familiar scent of cumin and coriander filling the sterile kitchen with something that felt like home. She could feel the weight of his attention, though, like a physical pressure against her skin. Why don't you have any food in this house? She asked, opening his refrigerator to find bottled water, expired yogurt, and nothing else. I eat out. Or, I don't eat. That's not healthy. Hence the personal chef arrangement. Sunita spun to face him. Is that really what this is about? You just wanted someone to make sure you eat vegetables? Kong pushed off the island, moving closer. Not threatening, but deliberate.
No.
That's not what this is about. Then what? I don't know yet. The honesty of it caught her off guard. She'd expected smooth lies, practiced manipulation. Instead, he sounded almost uncertain, like he'd surprised himself with the admission. They stood there in his pristine kitchen, the smell of her grandmother's recipes filling the space between them, and Sunita felt something shift. This wasn't just about debt. It wasn't just about control. There was something else happening, something neither of them had planned for. You should sit down, she said finally. This'll be ready in 20 minutes. He did, taking a seat at the counter where he could still watch her work. The silence that settled was less hostile than before, more contemplative. Sunita found herself explaining the dishes as she cooked, the way she always did when she was nervous. Egusi is ground melon seed. It's traditional in Nigerian cooking, usually makes a thick soup. I'm serving it deconstructed because traditional presentation intimidates people who aren't familiar with West African food. The gochujang is obvious, but the honey balances the heat. And the jollof.
She paused, stirring the rice.
My grandmother would probably disown me for what I'm about to serve you.
Why?
Because jollof is sacred. You don't mess with it. But I added coconut milk and lemongrass because I wanted to see if I could make something that honored the tradition while pushing it forward. Innovation versus preservation. Something like that. When the food was ready, she plated it with the same care she'd give a paying customer. Better, maybe because she needed him to understand what was at stake. The spice route wasn't just a business. It was legacy, translated through her hands into something that could survive in a world that wanted everything fast and cheap and disposable. Kong ate slowly, methodically, his expression unreadable. Sunita forced herself to stay still, to not fidget or explain or apologize. The food spoke for itself, or it didn't. The gochujang chicken needs more acidity, he said finally. The sweetness overwhelms. But the egusi is perfect. And the jollof. He took another bite, considering. Your grandmother would forgive you. Relief and irritation warred in her chest. You have opinions. I have a palate. There's a difference. Most of my investors can barely tell salt from sugar. I'm not most investors. He set down his fork, his gaze intense. I grew up in my mother's restaurant. Seoul, Itaewon District. She served traditional Korean food to American soldiers who wanted a taste of home and Koreans who wanted to remember what food used to taste like before everything became fast and franchised. I learned to cook before I learned to read. Sunita sat down across from him, drawn in despite herself. What happened to the restaurant? She sold it when I was 17. Said the neighborhood was changing, that she couldn't compete with the chains moving in. She was probably right, but I've never forgiven her for giving up. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I swore I'd never let economics destroy something beautiful again. Is that why you do what you do? Buy up struggling businesses. I restructure businesses with potential that's being strangled by poor management or undercapitalization. There's a difference. You also have a reputation.
I'm sure you do.
Sunita chose her words carefully. People say you have connections. Old money, new blood. That you're not just a venture capitalist. Kong smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. People say many things. Do you believe everything you hear? I believe you're dangerous. I believe getting in a car with you was probably the worst decision I've ever made. But I also believe you could have destroyed me this week, and you chose not to. So, either you're playing a long game I don't understand, or there's something else going on. Perhaps both. He stood, clearing the dishes with movements that suggested familiarity with the task. Sunita watched him, trying to reconcile the man who'd threatened her financial destruction with the one now rinsing plates in his designer sink. You don't have staff, she observed. Not here. I value my privacy. Must get lonely. Loneliness is a choice. He dried his hands, turned to face her. I'll have contracts drawn up making your boundary provisions legally binding. You'll have them by Monday. Thank you. Don't thank me. This arrangement benefits us both. But something in his voice suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as her. The second dinner, Sunita brought wine. A Nigerian palm wine she'd been saving, sweet and slightly fermented. Kong raised an eyebrow, but poured them both glasses. They talked about food, about business, about the careful balance between authenticity and accessibility. Kong had opinions on everything, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he was wrong. It should have been insufferable, but his knowledge was genuine, earned through experience rather than empty confidence. "You're actually listening," Sunita said, surprised. "Should I not be? Most men talk at me, not with me. Most men are fools." He refilled her wine glass. "Tell me about your grandmother."
So she did.
Talked about growing up in her grandmother's kitchen in Lagos, learning to pound yam before she could reach the counter, memorizing recipes that had been passed down through generations. Talked about immigrating to the States at 15, feeling caught between cultures, never quite Nigerian enough for her relatives, never quite American enough for her classmates. Food was the only language that made sense in both worlds, she said. I could take my grandmother's recipes and translate them for people who'd never left Georgia, make them taste home in flavors they didn't know they were missing. Kong listened with an intensity that made her nervous. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. My mother used to say that food is the only honest communication, he finally said. You can lie with words, with body language, with everything else. But when you cook for someone, you show them who you really are. What does that make this? Sunita gestured between them.
Us.
Complicated. It was the most honest thing he'd said. The dinners continued. 3 nights a week, Sunita cooked in Kang's sterile kitchen and tried to ignore the way the space felt less sterile with each visit. He started keeping ingredients she favored, good olive oil and fresh herbs and spices that cost more than they should. Started asking questions about her day, her challenges with suppliers, her frustrations with food critics who wanted exotic without strange. And slowly, carefully, Sunita began to see past the armor he wore like a second skin. Kong was brutal in business, but meticulous about fairness. He restructured her debt on terms that were aggressive but achievable, brought in a financial advisor who actually understood restaurant economics. When a supplier tried to price gouge her, he made a single phone call, and the supplier called back within an hour with an apology and a discount. You didn't have to do that, she said. You're my partner. People don't take advantage of my partners. Is that what I am? Your partner? His eyes darkened. What else would you be? Everything about this question felt loaded, dangerous. Sunita changed the subject. But the tension between them was becoming harder to ignore. The way Kang's hand would brush hers when he helped clear plates. The way his gaze would linger when she explained a cooking technique. The way the air felt thick when they stood too close in his narrow kitchen. Sunita told herself it was just proximity, just the forced intimacy of their arrangement. But when she lay awake at night, she wasn't thinking about debt restructuring or business partnerships. She was thinking about the way Kong looked at her like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. 2 months into their arrangement, everything changed. Sunita arrived at Kang's house to find him on the phone, his voice low and harsh in Korean. He looked different, tie loosened, hair disheveled, a tension in his shoulders that screamed violence barely contained. He ended the call when he saw her, but the storm in his expression didn't clear. Bad day? She asked carefully. You could say that. He poured himself whiskey, neat, drank it in one swallow. There's been a complication with one of my acquisitions. Anything I can help with? Unless you have experience with hostile takeovers and industrial espionage, no. He poured another drink, stared at it. Someone is trying to leverage my personal life against me, using information they shouldn't have access to. Sunita's stomach dropped. Information about what?
About you.
The kitchen suddenly felt very small. What kind of information? Photos of you coming to my house. Records of our financial arrangement. They're threatening to leak it to the press, make it look like I'm taking advantage of a debtor. It would destroy both our reputations. Who would do that? Competitors. Rivals. People who want to see me fail. He finally looked at her, and the rawness in his gaze made her breath catch.
I'm sorry.
This is my world bleeding into yours. You didn't sign up for this. Actually, I kind of did. Sunita moved closer, acting on instinct rather than sense. The contract said you get to be involved in my business. Stands to reason your business might involve me too. This isn't business. This is. He trailed off, jaw clenched. What? Dangerous. The people I deal with don't play fair. They use whatever leverage they can find, and right now you're leverage. Something fierce sparked in Sunita's chest. I'm not some helpless damsel. I can handle dangerous. You don't understand what you're saying. Then explain it to me. She stood her ground, refusing to back down. Stop protecting me from information and just tell me the truth. Kong studied her for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, staring out at his manicured lawn like it held answers. My family has been in acquisition and restructuring for 3 generations. But that's not all we do. We also provide alternative financing solutions for people who can't access traditional banking. High-risk loans with high interest rates and inflexible terms. Loan sharking. Among other things. He didn't flinch from the accusation. We operate in gray areas. Legal but barely. Ethical by a certain definition. My father built an empire on being the option of last resort, and I inherited that empire whether I wanted it or not. Do you want it? I want to transform it. Make it legitimate. Use the capital to invest in businesses like yours, things that actually create value rather than just extracting it. But changing a reputation takes time, and my father's associates don't appreciate change. Sunita processed this, fitting pieces together. The people threatening you. They're his people.
Some of them.
Others are rivals who see an opportunity. The end result is the same. They think you're a weakness they can exploit. Are you weak for me? The question hung between them like a held breath. Kong turned from the window, and the look on his face made her heart stutter. Yes, he said simply. And that's a problem. Sunita should have felt afraid. Should have grabbed her things and walked out. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a reckless certainty that whatever was happening between them was worth the risk. So make it a strength, she said.
What?
Everyone expects you to hide me, be ashamed of our arrangement. So don't. Make it public. Make it clear I'm your partner in every sense that matters, and that anyone who comes after me comes after you. Kong closed the distance between them in 3 strides. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, smell the whiskey on his breath. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. I'm offering to stop pretending this is just about debt. Her voice shook, but she didn't step back. I'm offering to acknowledge that something changed between us, and I don't think either of us planned for it, but here we are. Sunita. Her name sounded different in his mouth, weighted with things he wasn't saying. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't think about me when I'm not here. Tell me this is still just business. He couldn't. She watched him try and failed to form the words, watched his careful control fracture. Then his hand was in her hair, tilting her face up, and his mouth was on hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was months of tension released all at once, desperate and claiming and absolutely inevitable. Sunita kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even though there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kong rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he said. Absolutely. It will make everything more complicated. I know. People will say I'm taking advantage of you. Let them. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm a grown woman making my own choices. And I choose this. Whatever this is. Kong cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent in a way that contrasted sharply with the intensity of the kiss. I can't promise to be easy. I can't promise I won't be possessive and unreasonable about your safety. And I definitely can't promise that my world won't try to destroy you for being close to me. Good thing I'm harder to destroy than I look. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face into something almost boyish. I'm beginning to understand that. They stood there in his kitchen, The dinner Sunita had planned completely forgotten and let the truth settle between them. This was no longer about debt or business or obligation. This was about two people who'd collided by accident and decided to stay in each other's orbit. For the record, Kong said softly, "I've been thinking about you constantly since the moment you crashed into my car. You looked so fierce and terrified at the same time, and I thought, here is someone who refuses to break even when everything is breaking around her. I wanted to know what that felt like. And now I think I'm in serious trouble." Sunita laughed, the sound surprised out of her. "Join the club." The next morning, Kong went to war. He called a board meeting at Vanguard Holdings and laid out the situation with brutal efficiency. Someone was targeting him through Sunita. He wanted to know who, and he wanted them handled before they could do damage. The investigation took 3 days. When Kong called Sunita, his voice was cold in a way she'd never heard before. "It was internal. One of my junior analysts, working with a rival firm. They've been passing information for months. What are you going to do?" "What I always do. Remove the threat."
He paused.
"The photos they took, I've had them scrubbed. The story won't go public. But Sunita, you need to understand something. This won't be the last time. As long as you're connected to me, people will see you as a vulnerability to exploit. Then we make sure they're wrong."
"How?"
"By being a team. By not hiding." She took a breath, committing fully. "And by me learning how to navigate your world. I can't be a liability if I know how to protect myself." Kong was quiet for so long she thought the connection had dropped. "Then, you're serious?" "Completely. This isn't a romance novel, Sunita. The things I deal with, the people I deal with, they're not going to be charmed by your cooking and your determination." "Good thing I'm more than just cooking and determination." Her voice hardened. "I survived immigrating to a new country with nothing. I survived building a business from scratch in an industry designed to chew up people who look like me. I survived you offering me an impossible choice and finding a way to make it work. Don't underestimate me just because you're trying to protect me." Another long pause. Then, quietly, "I'm sorry. You're right. I know I am. So stop trying to shoulder everything alone and let me in." "Okay," he said, and she could hear the surrender in it, the relief. "Okay." The spice route's reopening, after 2 months of renovations funded by Kang's investment, was a calculated statement. Sunita designed a menu that showcased her evolution as a chef. Traditional Nigerian dishes elevated with Korean techniques, presented with the confidence of someone who no longer felt the need to apologize for her fusion approach. Kong attended as her partner, not her creditor. He sat at a prominent table and made sure everyone knew he was there supporting her, not controlling her. The critics came. The food bloggers came. The Atlanta food scene, always hungry for the next success story, came in droves. And the food spoke for itself. Within a month, the spice route had a 2-week waiting list. Within 2 months, Sunita had to hire back her line cook and add 2 more staff members. The debt that had seemed insurmountable was suddenly manageable, the future that had seemed impossible now tantalizingly close. But success brought its own complications. Sunita was working 14-hour days, trying to keep up with demand while maintaining quality. The dinners at Kang's house became less frequent, their relationship reduced to exhausted phone calls and texts sent at 2 in the morning. "I miss you," she said one night, her voice rough with fatigue. "I miss you too. But this is what you wanted. The restaurant thriving, independence, success." "I know. I just didn't think success would mean sacrificing us." "We're not sacrificed. We're just postponed." But postponed felt dangerously close to forgotten. 3 months after the reopening, Sunita got a call that changed everything. A prominent food magazine wanted to feature the spice route in their Rising Stars issue. National exposure. The kind of publicity that could transform a local success into a genuine brand. She said yes, without hesitation. Then spent the next week in a panic spiral trying to prepare. Kong showed up at the restaurant unannounced, found her in the kitchen at midnight, surrounded by recipe tests and notes. "When did you last sleep?" "I'll sleep when I'm dead." He physically removed the knife from her hand. "You'll sleep now." Come on. Kong, I can't. The magazine is coming in 4 days and
You need rest.
you need perspective. And you need to remember why you started this in the first place. He pulled her toward the door, ignoring her protests. Trust me. He drove her to his house, but didn't take her inside. Instead, he led her to the backyard, where he'd set up a simple table with 2 chairs and a portable burner.
We're cooking, he said.
What? You and me.
Together.
No pressure, no critics, no magazine profiles. Just cooking for the sake of cooking. Sunita stared at him. You're serious? Completely. He handed her an apron. Show me how to make your grandmother's egusi soup. The traditional way, no shortcuts, no modernization. Just the recipe she taught you. So they cooked. Under the stars in Kang's sterile backyard, Sunita talked him through the steps she'd learned as a child. The precise way to grind the melon seeds, the order to add the vegetables, the patience required to let flavors develop naturally. Kong followed her instructions with absolute focus, asking questions, making mistakes, learning with the humility of someone who genuinely wanted to understand. When the soup was done, they ate it sitting on the grass, the bowl between them, and Sunita felt something in her chest unclench. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For reminding me. For seeing what I needed before I knew I needed it. Kong set down his spoon, reached for her hand. I've been thinking about something you said. About being a team. Yeah, I want that. Not just in theory, but in practice. I want to be someone you can depend on, not just someone who restructured your debt. I want to know when you're overwhelmed, when you're scared, when you need help. And I want you to feel like you can tell me those things without it making you weak. Sunita squeezed his hand. I want that too. But I need you to let me do the same for you. I need you to stop treating your problems like burdens I can't handle and start treating me like someone who chooses to carry them with you.
Deal.
He pulled her closer, kissed her temple. We're really doing this, aren't we? Making a relationship work across every possible complication. Looks like it. My mother would have liked you. She had the same kind of stubborn determination. The same refusal to compromise her vision. Would she have approved? Of us? She would have said I was punching above my weight. And she would have been right. Sunita laughed, the sound soft in the night air. Your mother sounds like she had good taste. The magazine feature ran 2 months later. The photos were beautiful, the write-up glowing. They called Sunita a chef unafraid to honor her roots while pushing culinary boundaries, and described the spice route as the future of American dining, diverse, innovative, and unapologetically authentic. The feature included a brief mention of Kong as her business partner, described as the venture capitalist with a surprising palate and a reputation for backing unconventional ventures. The attention was overwhelming. The restaurant's waiting list extended to 6 weeks. Sunita got calls from other magazines, from television producers, from restaurant groups wanting to franchise her concept. It was everything she'd dreamed of. And it was terrifying. I don't know if I can do this, she confessed to Kong one night. Scale up, franchise, become a brand. That wasn't the dream. The dream was just making food that mattered. Then don't scale up. Stay small. Stay true to what you built. He tucked a lock behind her ear. You have options now. You're not trapped anymore by debt or desperation. You get to choose what success looks like for you. What if I choose wrong? Then you'll figure it out and choose differently. That's the thing about having stability. You can afford to make mistakes. Sunita leaned into his touch, letting the truth of that settle. She wasn't drowning anymore. Wasn't one missed payment away from losing everything. She had room to breathe, to think, to decide her own path forward. I think I want to stay small, she said slowly. 1 location. Maybe eventually 2. But focused on quality, on the experience, on food that tells a story. Not just another chain. Then that's what we'll do. I'm your partner, remember? 50% owner. You're stuck with me. She smiled. Could be worse. Could be better. Could be perfect. A year after the collision that had changed everything, Sunita stood in the Spice Route's kitchen and watched her staff execute a dinner service that ran like clockwork. The restaurant had found its rhythm, its identity, its place in Atlanta's food scene. Her debt to Vanguard Holdings was paid down to manageable levels. Kong had restructured his own stake in the business, reducing his ownership to 30% and putting the difference into a trust that would eventually buy him out completely. The restaurant would be fully hers again, but on a timeline that didn't sacrifice everything she'd built. Their relationship had settled into something that worked for both of them, complicated, intense, built on mutual respect and a shared understanding that some collisions were actually fate disguised as catastrophe. Kong still had his dangerous reputation, his gray market connections, his family legacy that he was slowly, methodically transforming into something he could be proud of. But he also had Sunita, who refused to be intimidated by his world and insisted on loving him anyway. And Sunita had her restaurant, her vision made real, her grandmother's legacy translated into something that could survive in a world that often felt hostile to dreams that looked like hers. She also had Kong, who'd seen her at her lowest point and offered not charity but partnership, who'd taken a collision and turned it into a beginning.
Chef.
Her sous chef interrupted her thoughts. We've got a VIP requesting a kitchen visit. Sunita smiled, already knowing who it would be. Send him back. Kong appeared in the doorway, suit jacket over his arm, tie loosened, looking like he'd come straight from closing another deal. He probably had. But he'd also made time to be here, to see her in her element, to be part of her world the way she'd become part of his. Good service? He asked. Perfect service. Then you have time for dinner? Always. She stripped off her apron, handed it to her sous chef. You've got this? We've got this, chef. Go. They left through the back entrance, Kang's hand at the small of her back, a gesture that had become familiar comfort. His car was parked illegally in the alley, expensive and impractical, and absolutely him. Where are we going? Sunita asked as she slid into the passenger seat. Does it matter? She looked at him, this man who'd entered her life through collision and stayed through choice, and smiled. No, she said. It doesn't matter at all. Because she'd learned something in the year since she'd crashed into his Lamborghini and upended both their lives. Sometimes the worst moments crack you open just enough to let the right things in. Sometimes debt becomes investment, obligation becomes choice, and collision becomes the beginning of something neither person saw coming, but both needed desperately. Sometimes you destroy something beautiful by accident, and in the rebuilding, create something even better. Kong started the engine, and they drove into the Atlanta night, two people from different worlds who'd found a way to build a world that belonged to both of them. Not without complications, not without struggle, but with the kind of honest foundation that could support the weight of everything they were becoming together.